Good morning, children. I hope you're all doing well. I will today begin a new chapter, which is the Blossom Tree. It is chapter number 9 and it is on page 111 of your buzzword reader. Before I begin with the explanation, I will just talk briefly about different kinds of stories. There is a warm up activity given on page 110. There are different kinds of stories, like we have mythological stories, fairy tales, folk tales, Aesop's fables. What are the mythological stories? These are stories about the gods and goddesses who often communicate with human beings, and these we don't know for sure whether they are true or not, but mostly they all have one common element, which is element of I can say it has a lot of battles. All right, and we don't know whether these are true or false. Next, we have all grown up listening to fairy tales, and the most popular ones are Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, and Red Riding Hood, and these stories need no introduction. Then coming to Aesop's fables, these are stories or poems with animals, and they always have a moral in them. And also these folk tales which are passed from one generation to the other, and they are related to the local culture and wisdom. Now, today the lesson which we are doing is a Jataka tale, which we can classify in the group of Aesop fables. These Jataka tales, they are very ancient forms of literature. These are enjoyable and knowledgeable tales which were written for the people to gain knowledge, and they were mostly narrated by Gautam Buddha so that people develop good values. It was originally written in Pali language, and these tales have been translated in different languages around the world. And these were intended to impart the values of self sacrifice, morality, honesty. And there are almost around 547 in number, and they form a very important part of Buddhist literature. Jataka tales represents incarnations of Buddha, at times like an animal, sometimes like a bird, and at other times like human being, the future Siddhartha Gautama. The setting of these stories is in or near Benares, which is our modern day Varanasi, the holy city in north central India. The Blossom Tree on page 111. I'll begin with the explanation. Children, please follow the comic script, and you can just listen to the explanation because it's a very simple chapter and a very interesting one. At the time of Buddha, Benares had been the holy city of India for many centuries, and Hinduism was its ancient religion. The city was famous for fine temples, beautiful green parks, and many traders traveled to this city. Now there was a very famous merchant by the name of Patanpali. He left his wealth to his friend Jigme, a simple shepherd, before going on a voyage. The other merchants could not understand that how a rich merchant could trust the poor shepherd and asked Buddha to explain it to them. So Buddha begins to tell the story. He began, the king's palace was in a beautiful park where the king spent many happy hours gardening and looking after his favorite blossom tree. It was the jewel of the park, and he used to look after it very carefully. Now, one day, the king was shocked to see that the main wooden pillar and the ceiling which it had been supporting had cracked. He felt that the palace would collapse if they were not repaired, and it had to be done very quickly, or it would split from top to bottom. He ordered his men to search the parks and the palace grounds for a suitable tree from which a new pillar could be made. All of them that day, the carpenters, the builders, they searched the park to find a suitable tree for the new pillar. Page 112. After inspecting all the trees in the park, the king's carpenters realized that there was only one tree that could be used. Hence, the head carpenter returned to the palace and he told the king that his beloved blossom tree was the only one which was quite strong to replace the old one. The king was confused because he did not know what to do. It was a tough decision for him. He knew that the blossom tree would be suitable enough for making the new pillar or his palace would collapse. He thought very sadly about it because it was the only tree, even if it was a special one. So he had no choice. He ordered the carpenters to cut it down. The blossom tree did not know what to do to save itself, and the plight of the blossom tree was shared by the other trees in the park. They gathered around the blossom tree, trying to comfort it. They all tried to think of some way or the other to help her save herself. Every tree made a suggestion, but none was really likely to save the blossom tree. Page 113. When the poor blossom tree was crying in despair, she heard the kush grass say in a soft voice, "Do not worry, my friend, for I have an idea which will save you." At daybreak, the king's two woodcutters reached the garden carrying two great axes. One of them began to inspect the blossom tree to find the best place to start chopping. They were surprised to see that the bark of the tree looked quite different from the day before. Carefully, the woodcutter touched the bark, but it felt soft. Now, what will happen? "This tree has gotten rotten here," he said to his companion. He tasted another part of the tree, and that too had gone soft. They peered up at the branches of the blossom tree. All its leaves hung limply as if they were sick and wilting. So they decided to inform the king. Hence they hurried back to the palace. The woodcutter told the king that the blossom tree had gone rotten, so they could not chop it down. The king was surprised. At As his mind raced, an idea flew into his mind. He asked the carpenters to send some men to the city to bring back three great trees. He told them to bind them together to make a pillar. Soon the pillar of the palace was replaced. Page 114. But in the garden, all the other trees began asking questions to the blossom tree. But the trees wanted to know, "How did you go rotten in one night?" The blossom tree laughed and explained that the chameleon, friends of the kush grass, moved over the tree trunk quicker than the eye could see. Thus the woodsman thought that the soft body of the chameleon was the bark of the tree and that it had not rot. Now the blossom tree sang praises of the kush grass. Truly, we should choose our friends without considering whether they are superiors, equals, or inferiors, making no distinction whether they be tree, bird, or grass. Each, according to his strength, can help a friend in his hour of need. As he finished his story, Buddha smiled at the merchant who was laughing, for his neighbors who had thought him so foolish had received their answer. All the merchants bowed low and thanked him. Now, with this, we end the story. Here, I would like to emphasize on friendship. What do you mean by friendship? It is a combination of affection, loyalty, love, respect, and trust. And the general character traits of a friend include, like, generally, you will be attracted by a person who has your interest, who respects you, and who shows an attachment for you. The emotional safety which a friend gives should not be compared to your thoughts, and you shouldn't be measuring words, that you should not think that what will happen if I say this, I will hurt him. No, even if he is wrong, you should point it out. If he is correct, you should praise him. If he is in a dilemma, you should come forward and try to resolve his doubts, his insecurities. You should confirm in him that no, what is true should be done. So, true friendship is when someone knows you better than yourself and takes a position in your best interest in a crisis. Now we have read about the chameleons. I hope you all know what chameleons are. They mostly live in trees, and they are also found in the deserts. The color helps them blend with their habitat, and they when they are in trees they are usually green. When they are in deserts, those where there you have no trees, so they camouflage with the soil sands. They often change color to warm or cool down. They also switch shades to communicate with the other chameleons, and they bright colors to attract or warn enemies. Now you must be wondering, how do the chameleons change colors? The outer layer of the skin is see-through. So it is kind of, you beneath that layer there are special cells filled with pigments. Just like leaves have green pigments, similarly their cells also have pigments, and the brain sends message to the cells to get bigger or smaller. As this happens, the pigments are released and they mix with each other to create new skin tones. For instance, red and blue pigment will mix to make the chameleon look purple, right? So I hope you've enjoyed reading this story and that you will all be true to your